podcast where nothing's off the table. From Bible mysteries and strange phenomena to the questions that keep you up at night, we explore it all with curiosity and faith. I'm your host, Courtney, joined by my co-hosts, Caleb and Jeremy. Together, we dive into the weird, the wonderful, and the wildly curious. So grab your coffee, open your mind, and let's babble. Hey there, my peeps, and welcome back to the Power of Babble. We're here with another episode today. How's it going, gentlemen?
I don't know if I like you referring to them as peeps.
They're my peeps.
There are
We have a thing going.
Babelites. There are highly respected and valued Babelites.
Babelites.
Yeah.
Hello, my Babelites.
Yeah. Gotta
So
make the
glad y'all are
t-shirts.
joining us. T-shirts? I don't know that we're there yet, Caleb. All right, so we're back on another episode today. We're going to talk about 2 John today.
2 John.
2 John.
2 John.
Not
Dear John.
Not Dear John.
Good book.
2 John.
Okay, why are we talking about 2 John? Why?
Because it's weird, and I wanted to talk about it, and you don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and that seems kind of like our niche. So,
Yeah,
you know.
weird stuff. Yeah.
So it's a very short book, chapter, all of the above. So I do want to read it before we get into it. But can we set up what it is that I do want to get a little bit into like the historical context a little bit later, maybe to set us up more. But the author is John.
John.
Same John that wrote the Gospel.
Right.
Same John that wrote Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Um,
John the Revelator.
Yeah.
Apostle John.
I'll flesh that out a little more later,
Okay.
but yes.
and there's 3 of these books, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just very fascinated by John. I just read a book. It's called The Beloved Disciple by Beth Moore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the life of Jesus and the apostles through John's eyes. Really, really great book. You should check it out and read it. I don't know if y'all have read it. Probably
I'm
not.
not.
But so I have John fresh on my mind, actually. I just finished reading that. He's the youngest, maybe, of the
Possibly, yeah.
disciples. And
They were all pretty young, but he
Yeah.
would definitely have been young.
And is this correct that he was the only one out of the core group that was not a martyr?
Yeah, according to church tradition, yes, that is true.
Okay.
The church tradition tells us that all of the apostles were martyred, but John was not martyred; he was exiled.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is
So-
also not fun.
No,
Like,
yeah,
not
Yeah,
fun by
not
any
that he had it
means.
any easier,
Right.
but I just thought that was very interesting. And we can get more into the historical context a little later if we want to, but can you kind of set us up for, is he exiled to Patmos at this time when he's writing that, or is that just Revelation?
So that would have been later in his life when he's exiled. And we know that the book of Revelation is written in that context because he says
Yeah,
while
right.
he's on the Isle of Patmos.
This one seems like he's like a part of a local body at least. I
Yeah.
know we're going to get into like all of
I
that,
can't-
but it kind of seems like,
So I can't recall. Maybe Jeremy remembers this. I don't remember off the top of my head where most scholars date the book.
According to my ESV study Bible.
Oh.
Interesting.
We're not sponsored by them. I just like
But-
we would
it's
love
good.
to be.
So according to them, it's probably somewhere around a decade before he writes Revelation.
Okay.
okay.
So he's old. He's and like Courtney said, probably still kicking around, involved with a local church in some kind of like eldership
Or I would suggest,
role.
and I would suggest local churches.
Yes,
yeah, it
because
alludes to, I mean,
This
the
is what
scripture itself
this is really
alludes
what
to
all
it.
of the
Right.
apostles do.
Because if
is-
you're writing a letter to a church, it's because you're not physically present to be able to say that thing.
Right.
Usually,
Yeah.
so he's at least involved with some kind of network of churches, or he's kicking around. Maybe who knows, right? But
Yeah.
yes, so he is a leader in the church. He is old at this point. He has seen some stuff because scholars say this could be written as late as 95 AD, probably after 80 AD. So do the math. It's like 50ish years after Jesus' ascension.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, at this point, he's a mature believer and leader. Stuff has gone down. The second temple has already been
destroyed in 70 AD, right?
The diaspora, the spreading of Christians everywhere. He's writing this to the church in Ephesus, this particular letter.
Okay. I
So
don't think I knew that.
Maybe.
maybe.
Ah.
Well,
Maybe.
maybe. Okay, that's
If it's a letter to a church.
the
We're gonna get
scholarly
into it.
consensus.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah,
All right.
that's so other than that, it's a short letter. It has a lot of the hallmarks of a typical epistle. But there's some weird little quirks about how it's written.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we dive into it, then Jeremy, you have your Bible out already. Do you care to read us? It's how many verses?
I care, but I'll do it anyway. It's about 13 verses, yes.
All right. Read it
So
for us.
everyone get comfy.
Get your
Gonna
coffee.
Just take a minute. Just 1 minute. 2 John. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father and from Jesus Christ the Father's Son, in truth and love. I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but the one we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting, for whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. Though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face, so that our joy may be complete. The children of your elect sister greet you. And that's it.
All right. So short chapter / book, but packed with some stuff.
Yeah.
Packed with some
Yeah.
stuff. So one of the things that it can be easy to overlook there, in terms of how it's written, that you might have noticed when I was reading it, is that, is this written to a church? Because if you remember how he starts it off, the elder to the elect lady and her children. And
Who is this lady?
he continues to use that language all the way even up to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So is this a lady with kids, or is this a church?
Or is it both?
¿Por
Right.
qué no los dos?
I mean, yeah, it's odd. It's a strange way to, because I mean, here's the thing: not every New Testament epistle is directly addressed to who it's written to, right? Sometimes we have to read between the lines and figure out, but many of them are, right? I mean, Paul opens a lot of his letters by just saying, greeting the church that he's writing this particular letter to. This one is much more ambiguous in terms of the way that it's written. So much so that I would think, and a lot of scholars think, that it's intentionally ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
He's writing this, opening this letter in such a way, and really carrying on that language even to the end. The last verse continues the theme in such a way so as to intentionally obscure who the letter is written to and who is its intended audience.
Yes.
Is that because the content is about perhaps like a false teacher, and that's why it's elusive, or what is it?
There's a couple different theories
Okay,
here.
is that getting too deep already?
Well, no, I mean,
To dive into?
it's just that there are a couple of different. Let's talk about some of the theories in terms of who the letters are written to.
Okay, can I ask a question first?
Sure.
1 John and 3 John, is it written to the same people?
Well, it's going to depend
Is
on
it-
how you answer the question
Okay.
of who this one is written to.
Okay. Does he use the same language in 1 and 3 John?
So 3 John starts, the elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth, which is a person's name.
So it's much more explicit in terms of who the audience is.
If we
is
turn
that
over,
Ephesus?
if we turn to First John, he starts out in a completely different register, which is that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we looked upon and have touched with our hands, etc., etc. This sounds a whole lot more like a sermon than a
that was
letter,
recorded. Yeah,
than a
that
typical
someone had
epistle.
basically transcribed it.
Yeah.
So the answer is no. None of the 3 letter epistles of John start exactly like each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question that most people are going to ask is who is this to? Is it to a woman, right? So let's talk about that one first. Okay. So the sort of baseline easiest way to read it perhaps might be to say, well, when he says to the elect lady, he literally means a lady. And he's addressing it to her and to her children because he uses this language about her children. I would suggest that even if that's the case, it's still odd because he doesn't mention her name, right? So even if he is writing to an individual, he still seems to be trying to obscure something about the identity of the recipient.
Yeah.
But also, like, some of the content that would be, I mean, he doesn't say anything bad, but it would be a little weird, right? Like in verse 5, he says, "And now I ask you, dear lady, that we love one another." He's like, is this John's love
The love
letter
letter?
that makes it into the canon of Scripture?
Mm.
Like that's what you would have to the inevitable logical conclusion if you think this is just written to a person.
Right, and the opening verse says from the elder to the elect lady, and then at the end it says something about her sister, right? So who's the identity of the sister, right? So there's lots of, regardless of whether you think this is written to an individual, as Jeremy points out, there's some odd awkward things about that interpretation. Or if you think it's written to a church, so that the lady language is sort of a metaphorical way of referring to a corporate body.
Right. Ecclesia, the word commonly used for church, is feminine.
Yes.
In Greek. It would make sense that he would use a general, feminine word to refer to a church.
And not just ecclesia, but also lots of the other language in the New Testament surrounding the church is feminine in nature as well.
Yeah.
The bride
of Christ,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There are, and even really going back, it's sort of a Jewish tradition to refer to the communal people of God in feminine terms, right? Israel is often referred to in feminine terms. And so whether positive or negative, right? So there's lots of textual tradition going even back to the Old Covenant that would say that a corporate communal body that belongs to God is referred to in feminine terms.
Yeah.
So,
well, the sister part would also check out, because the way I read it was, it seemed as though John was somehow a part of this sister church.
Yeah, and he's writing to his sister church, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
We do that, by the way. Right, we'll talk about. I mean, when television stations do this, right, they'll say our sister network, which is some other network that has an association or relationship with them, right?
Yeah.
And so that seems like a very natural reading to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll throw this in there too. Some people will try to say that, well, it's actually both, right? Which is that because it is corporate, which does away with some of those awkward things that Jeremy was referring to and sort of makes sense of that language. But also, a lot of the house churches in the New Testament were held within the house of women. And so it may be the case that this is a particular woman's house where she's hosting this church. And so it might
Shout
be
out to women.
yeah. So they might be hosting where's your house church, Courtney? But they might be hosting the church, and so it might be a double entendre. Yeah. He might be referring both to the elect lady whose home they're meeting in, and also maybe referring to the corporate church. I'll tell you where I sort of land on it. I just kind of don't think it's even necessary to posit the double thing. I think he's probably just referring to the church in feminine terms.
Does it matter?
No.
Either way, I mean, is there problems if it's a woman and not a church?
Does it matter? That's I think
Well-
that's an interesting question because in terms of application, I don't think it matters terribly much because the direct commands that he gives, especially in the last part of the letter, are going to be clear and immutable no matter what you think, who you think he's writing it to, because
Yeah.
they're general commands for people generally. But I think it can give us more of an appreciation for the context and the immediacy and the urgency in which he is writing, and some of the things that were going on at the time, and by extension, some of the ways that what he's saying can be applicable today. Because, we might find ourselves in similar circumstances, and that recognizing that might give us more insight in how to apply this teaching and when to apply it.
Mm.
So it does matter. It's not going to totally sink your boat to miss it, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this, was because where your mind went, where my mind went, where probably most of our listeners' minds went, I won't say anything about Caleb because who knows, but where most
We might
people's
know about
mind
him.
goes,
My mind's in strange places.
yeah, where most people's minds go when they read this is just immediately, oh, he's talking to a church. But I'm going to take a step back and say, that's not in the text. That's probably the right interpretation. That's not in the text. What do we have to do to get from what's in the text to that interpretation, and what can that tell us?
Okay.
So let me ask you, let me put this as a question, right? So the thing that I always like to tell people is look for something weird. It's weird that he's referring to a church as a woman and doing so consistently and not really breaking character and saying church like halfway through. Why would he do that? What might motivate him to do that? What could be the reason behind that?
Well, I think I might have alluded to it earlier, which is this the idea. It gives you the sense that maybe he's trying to obscure who the recipient is.
Yeah. Well, and my thought was just given the context of what he's saying in the letter would give reason as to why he might want
to hide the
who it's
identity.
to, yeah.
Yeah, because what's he talking about in the letter? False teachers,
Right.
divisions within the church.
Yeah.
But also he's writing at a time when he's very close to being exiled, and a good number of Christians have been killed and martyred.
Mm.
And so this goes back to the persecution angle, right? So it's possible there's persecution going on within the church. Maybe whatever people he's writing to, the people who are holding to a false gospel have gained the upper hand. And John is potentially writing to the minority community, the actual believers, and encouraging them, don't let the people spreading the false gospel tell you who to listen to and who not to. Don't, they're pushing you out, they don't want anything to do with you, that's fine, because you don't want to have anything to do with them, because it would look like you're encouraging that. It could also be the fact that John is concerned about this letter and the carrier of the letter being intercepted. And so it is possible that he is trying to minimize the damage of the letter being intercepted. And I think this applies to both if it's within the church or it's persecution from the Romans or something. Because if he phrases it to one person and their immediate family, then the scale of the group that he's writing to may go unnoticed. And that would mitigate the damage of this being intercepted and hostile people getting their hands on this, right?
Yeah.
So if it's the Romans, they look at this and say, okay, well, we need to find out who this lady is that he's writing to. And maybe that's like a red herring because there is no lady to find. It's actually a church, right? You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it raises that I think is a reasonable understanding of why he might be trying to obscure the identity of the recipient. I mean, here's the thing: John probably knows. He probably knows that when he writes the letter, even though he's maybe writing to a specific church, that the letter will then be passed around in a circular manner, because this is the way that apostolic letters are used in the first century, in the first couple centuries, right? So what happens is, Paul writes a letter to the Corinthians or to the Romans or to the Ephesians or whoever it is, and he has them in mind, but because of what he is writing, it has applicable scriptural truth to all the churches, they pass the letter around. They make
Yeah.
copies of it, and then they share it with one another. So it's probably not super important that the content of the letter for whoever's going to read it, that it actually names a specific church. So John may say, look, it doesn't matter to me whether I name the church or not, right? But it might matter if the wrong people get a hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to abstain from using any specific identifiers, and he's going to use this sort of cryptic, covert language to sort of protect the recipient or whoever the letter may
Yeah.
wind up in their hands.
So yeah, let's say it's originally sent to Ephesus, and he names the church at Ephesus, but it winds up in Sardis, and the Romans and it's being read to the church in Sardis, but the Romans get their hands on it. Now the Romans know there's a church in Sardis and in Ephesus that they have to, root out. If it's just to the elect lady, it's like, oh, well, we caught the guys, right?
Yeah.
Damage
Yeah.
mitigation,
Yeah.
potentially.
Well, and we know John's fate, so we know at some point he
Mhm.
does get exiled. So it makes sense as to why
That there are
he would have
pressures.
some.
Yeah.
He would have some. What's the word I'm looking for?
So-
Pause on
yeah.
like wanting to send, and be outright like that.
Something that's incriminating. I mean, and this does, I think, raise the further question that you've been gesturing towards, Jeremy, which is this question of, well, where is the pressure coming from, or the threat coming from? Is it coming from the Roman authorities? Is it an imperial threat, right? Because we know that throughout all this, really most of the first century, there's lots of systemic persecution of Christians from the
Right.
imperial powers. So that would be a logical thing. However, I would suggest that the content of the letter, because it makes these allusions or even explicit references to false teachers,
Mhm.
suggests that John does not have the imperial threat in mind alone. I stress alone
It's an
because
inside job. Is that what you're saying?
I think he's concerned about a potential inside job.
Yeah.
Because what he's concerned about is he uses language like don't let them in your house,
Yeah.
right? If they don't preach the same Christology, we'll get into this too, because this is where I'm really interested in what the
Okay.
content of the problem is that he's trying to address. But he says don't let these people, if they have a different Christology than you do and a different Christology than the one I've preached, then don't let them in your house.
Right.
Don't give them hospitality. And I think the way it reads to me is that he's concerned with more than just associating with the wrong kind of people, right? I mean, that obviously is a concern. Like he's saying, look, yeah, don't hang out with heretics. But I think he's saying something more than that. I think what he's saying is you should be careful, especially in the context of him writing in such a covert and euphemistic way. I think we're supposed to read these cautions about be careful who's in your house kind of thing as also a code for saying there might be spies among you, right? I know that might sound a little conspiratorial, but I don't think it's a big leap in terms of plausibility, because what we're talking about is a context wherein people who have differing religious beliefs may try to leverage imperial power against their opponents.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Right? So if someone who comes into the midst of a church and then they're welcomed and given hospitality, which is what he's warning about, be careful who you give hospitality to. They come in, they give them hospitality, and then the person realizes that these people believe contrary to what they believe and wants to get them in trouble.
Yeah.
They can rat on them basically to the imperial powers.
Yeah.
And so he may be giving a warning to this local church to say,
Yeah.
be careful who you let in your midst, because there are people who seek our destruction.
Mhm.
It's not just that, you shouldn't be associating with these people because they're heretics, but also because it might put you in danger.
Yeah. You can almost feel the tension too, because I think he maybe in the beginning of it talks about love, and so you almost feel the tension of how do you love all people but also guard yourself from these false teachers,
Yeah.
And
and
this
do
I
it
th-
in a biblical way.
And this, I think, is a place where thinking about the historical context does lead us to some interesting application. Because, there are places around the world where you do have to have these kinds of concerns and levels of secrecy on a routine basis.
Yeah.
And if we don't have something like this in the Bible, there might be people who say, "Yeah, but like the message of Christ was to welcome everyone unconditionally and just not try to draw lines and just make yourself open because you might save somebody." And it's like, yeah, that kind of stuff is in there, but this epistle is in there too. And I love this too because I was just thinking, as y'all were talking, Jesus' admonition to be wise as serpents but innocent as doves. And here John, I think, is really taking that to heart and living that out. Because at this point, he's an old guy. He's learned a few things. He's survived as long as he has, not just because God has let him, but also because, he's had to make some good choices, right? And that's not to say that the ones who got martyred made bad choices, but for him, he's being obviously strategic and he's thinking about context and safety and OPSEC, to use a current day term. And it's interesting.
OPSEC? I've not heard that.
OPSEC, operational security. Yeah. So, yeah.
Sorry.
He really is on a list for the CIA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, basically just don't invite trouble. Don't make yourself an easy target. And that's, I see that in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things where my mind sort of goes from that standpoint. So if we're saying, look, okay, we're picking up what you're laying down, John, in terms of we're trying to be on the down low about who this is written to. We're not naming names where we don't have to name names, and also be careful who you let come into your presence, right? To who you welcome into the fold, right? There are like Jeremy's alluded to. There are some boundaries in terms of who we should give hospitality to. A, because we don't want to endorse what they say or believe, which might run contrary to the truth, but also B, because welcoming them into our midst may put us in danger. And so, we're picking that up. Now, the question is, to me, my mind goes to, what is the exact issue here that John is talking about? What is the source of difference between whoever these people are, whether they're insiders who are coming into the church, or not? Like, what is it that would cause them to want to bring harm toward this particular congregation or any of the congregations in the first century? So it seems that he lays out that the issue at hand, the issue that's causing the conflict, is the issue of Christology.
Yes.
It's all about Christology. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, Christology means the doctrine of Christ, right? Who do we? I sound like Jesus. Who do men say that I am? Right. This is sort of the fundamental question that sort of determines whether or not you are a Christian or not. That's what separates Christianity from Judaism and from the other Abrahamic faiths, Islam and so forth, is what we say about the person of Christ. So it's to say that it's important is a huge understatement. And he seems to be saying this question of who Christ is the area of dispute amongst these people. Yeah.
And we get this from verse 7 especially, which is where he says, those who deny that Christ came in the flesh.
Yeah.
These are the ones you have to look out for.
Yeah, and so to put a point on what is the exact heresy, there's a number of ways that you can take this. I mean, you can say, well, this is some sort of early Gnosticism.
Because this scholar, I've heard a lot of scholars say this would be too early for full-blown Gnosticism.
Yeah, it would be like a proto-Gnosticism, right?
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so Gnosticism is a complex set of beliefs that really does develop later, but some of the seeds of the ideas were probably present already in this part of the first century, which is the full-blown version is this. It's the claim that the physical world is evil. It's more complicated than this. I'm giving you a simple version. The physical world is evil. The spiritual, immaterial world is good. And it's really centered around this idea of gnosis or secret knowledge from God. And so you have people, itinerant people, ministers, and so forth, who would go around claiming that they have secret knowledge from God. Sounds like some preachers this day that I've heard.
And there's like levels to this, right? So like the basic level is like the level of everyday life, which is physical existence. But like it's not just physical and spiritual. It's like there's one level of spiritual and then another and then another and another and eventually you get back to like the pure, real, deepest or highest level of spirituality.
Yeah, and to be clear, that it's a non-physical, immaterial state, that pure existence,
it sounds
right?
like very like different religion type stuff, like Buddhism, or
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know, it's
very-
giving that vibe to me.
The modern day
Like
new
attaining.
the modern day New Age movement, you could say it's a strange blend of Gnosticism and Buddhism.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where a lot of these ideas, or at least similar ideas, you're most likely to encounter them.
You can also say that lots of modern evangelical Christianity is influenced by Gnosticism too. The claim that we are going to escape this world and go, I'll fly away, and go sit on a cloud and play a harp, that kind of thing, as a ghost.
Or that like
The naked baby.
yeah, or that like the body, the body is evil, or fleshly existence is evil. A lot of this is from a misinterpretation of what the Bible means when it says the flesh.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and so when it talks about the flesh, it's not saying literally that physical matter is bad.
Yeah.
The claim is that your natural state gives you impulses that run contrary to God's will. Is what the claim is. It doesn't actually have to do with the physical nature, because we know it can't, because the theology of the Bible throughout is that God created the physical world and saw that it was good, and that Jesus raised from the dead physically, that He promises to raise us from the dead physically, right?
The coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh.
In the flesh.
Chapter, in verse 7, that's the sticking point, right?
So this is where I want to sort of talk about the broader theology of John. And I'm not going to wade into some of the debates. I mentioned it. I might have mentioned it. I can't remember. There is some debate about the identity of the author, in the sense that there's disagreement amongst scholars about who John is, right? There's some people who will say there's John the Apostle, and then they'll say there's John the Elder. Now, you'll notice that at the beginning of this letter, it does say the elder to the elect lady. So some people will try to say, well, this is a different John.
He is elder at this point.
Yeah, he is elder.
He's old.
This is my thing. Is that I don't really see. I don't see the warrant. There are some people in church history that they will want to try to connect this to, who also, John's a common name, and so they'll want to try and do that. I just don't think there's any necessity in that, because it seems to me that the entire Johannine corpus, whether you're talking,
what does that mean?
Johannine
corpus.
It's the adjective. So
We're right here together,
Johannine, if you take John and you make an adjective out of it, that's Johannine, right?
Yeah.
And so this thing has to do with John, and corpus is just body of work. So basically, Johannine corpus is all the stuff that John wrote.
Right.
Okay.
Everything that has John attached to it.
Gotcha.
So this would include the Gospel of John, the 3 epistles of John, and the book of Revelation, right?
Okay.
To me, when I read all of those, there may be quibbling and debate about the type of Greek that's used in some of those texts, but the theology of all of those books is so crystal clear to me that it's the same theology. That it's hard for me to believe that it's not the same person who's responsible for all of those works.
Yep.
And so and there even some of the language used here in 2 John, where he talks about abiding in this teaching, abiding. He uses this language, right? Which is language that we see elsewhere in John's gospel and elsewhere, right?
Revelation.
So in Revelation, this is a big thing. So there's lots of language that makes me think this, and then also I wouldn't be surprised for the same John who's responsible for the gospel to be really concerned with Christology.
Yeah.
Because what's one of the things you learn from that gospel about John? He was the disciple whom Jesus loved.
Yeah,
you always
the
see
beloved
John
disciple.
chilling very close to Jesus.
And John's theology of the identity of Christ is the most elevated of any of the Gospels. John starts the Gospel by not with the facts of Jesus' earthly life, but rather he takes it back to the cosmic beginning, Genesis 1 style. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then he says, all things were made through this Word. And then he says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The word there, dwelt, by the way, is skenu, which means to tabernacle among us, right? So he says the word that was in the beginning and was God. Notice the high Christology here. The claim here is that Jesus in the flesh is God. He's divine, and this divine God in the flesh is dwelling in the flesh among us, tabernacling so that his presence is with us, and everything that was created is created from him. This is as high a Christology as you can have. And so he's very concerned about having the correct view of the identity, the divine identity of Jesus, and the incarnate divine identity of Jesus.
Because imagine if you're John, you're like 60, 70 years old, who knows, right? And there's a bunch of people running around that says the guy that you knew very closely wasn't actually flesh and blood, and they start inventing all kinds of like crazy nonsense about him. So number one, that's theologically wrong, but I kind of like the fact that it's John talking about this, because I can just see him like just getting annoyed, like, why are you saying that? I knew the guy.
That
I
would
was
be
there.
super frustrating to have known.
It's like he was one of my closest friends.
Yeah.
I knew him, and I still know him. And so be quiet. Don't tolerate that stuff.
So the other thing, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but the other thing is that I don't think he's just concerned with the fleshly thing. Obviously, he puts that pretty front and center when he says that about Christ in the flesh. But he's also, it's more than just that. So if he is responding to some kind of proto-Gnostic heresy, I think he may also be responding to other types of heresies that may have been present at the time as well, namely those that deny the divinity of Christ. And the reason why I think this is because he has this language where he talks about, if you receive the Son who has become incarnate, you will receive the Son and the Father, right? He actually, it's interesting because he uses the term God, right, and then interchanges that word for Father. So, which is a common New Testament technique that New Testament authors will use, is they will refer to God the Father with the term theos in Greek, which is just the common Greek word for God. And they'll refer to Jesus, he doesn't here, but often they'll refer to him as Kyrios, which is Lord. And they do this to differentiate, not to say that Jesus is not God, but they don't use the same term theos for Jesus and for God the Father, so that they can differentiate the persons. And, okay? So that you know which person in the Godhead are they talking about, right? They're talking about the Father or the Son. Well, if it's Kyrios, it's the Son. And if it's theos, then it's the Father. And the reason why Kyrios, this is a tangent, but I just want to point this out to some people who maybe have this question in their mind. Kyrios is still a divine claim, because the Greek word Kyrios, which means Lord, is this word used in the Greek translation of the Old Testament to translate the name Yahweh. Right.
So does this go back to like the Psalm, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand,
right? So, and the reason why that's relevant, that whole discussion about the distinction between the Father and the Son, is because this crops up here in John 2, in 2 John, which is, he says, look, they can't make claim to the Father apart from recognizing the divinity of the Son. Because what does Jesus say about himself? He says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Right? No one can come to the Father except through the Son. So the Christology that he's mapping out isn't just an incarnate Christ. It is God in the flesh. He says they have to affirm God in the flesh, that Jesus and the Christ, the Messiah, come in the flesh. But also he's saying you can't have the Father, the Theos, right? He interchanges both of those terms, unless you have the Son, right? He says, look, if you have the Son, you'll have both of them.
Mhm.
Why? Because the Father and I are one. That's what Jesus says, right?
Mhm.
So he's making a claim, I think, about, yes, the physical incarnation of the Christ, and also I think he's making a really close association with the Christ, the Son,
Mhm.
with Theos, the Father.
Yeah.
And so it's also about the divinity of the Messiah. And so I think he's got both of these things in his head, probably because both of these heresies are going around. Right?
Yeah.
People who either deny that Jesus physically came in the flesh, which is what the proto-Gnostic thing, and then people who would, sort of a proto-Arianism or whatever, who would deny the divinity of Jesus. He's trying to fence off the church from giving entertaining audience with these people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is still really relevant today.
Super relevant.
Both
yeah.
sides of that coin, because there's all types of ideas and movements and other religions that want to talk about God and want to try to adapt that into Christian terms, but they separate the Father and the Son, and they want to try to do that. And if you accept that as a presupposition, you're already sunk, because it is fundamentally axiomatic to the Christian faith that you can't separate those two apart. You can't separate the Spirit. You can't separate the Son. You can't separate the Father. It's a package deal. If you have one of those, you have all of them.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess that kind of leads into my next question and wondering is, as we read this as believers, how do we apply what John wrote to whoever he wrote um, to our walk with Christ? Because not even other religions, but even within the body, which I think is also what he is saying, there's just so much garbage that's around. How do we apply what he's saying to us?
You want to go first or me? Because
I-
I have things to say.
I'll go. I'm going to say something maybe a little spicy, but probably not, which
Spice
is
it up.
that, like, the idea that as Christians, we should just accept any kind of teaching from anybody who claims to be a Christian and just say, well, they're going to, like, they have their own idea of God and maybe we're all mistaken. That's wrong. That's wrong. There are things we can disagree about as Christians, right? Like, do you have to be fully submerged or can you be sprinkled to be baptized,
Right.
That's not what I'm talking about here. But even if someone comes to you and says, I am a Christian, I believe in Jesus Christ, I believe in God, if they're teaching that, these Jesus and the Father are separate, or Jesus didn't come in the flesh, or any of these fundamental things about Christology or the Trinity that are wrong, this is not something we can overlook, right? This is something that you have to say, no, I don't want any part of that, because that
Yeah.
is not that's not a true understanding of who God is, and that's not going to lead me to God by definition.
Yeah. Well, as you're scrolling on
Yeah.
YouTube or social media and you see, it's just, I mean, it's everywhere.
Mhm.
It's all around you. It's easy to just soak it all in, and you have to be careful what's really at the root of what they're saying.
Yeah. Not everyone. Well, I mean, my instinct is to say, not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," right?
Right.
But also, not everyone who looks like, walks like, talks like, and sounds like they're a believer on the surface. The surface things are easy to imitate. I'll just
Yes.
put it that way. When we drill down to these
Yeah.
more fundamental issues is where the cards get put on the table as to whether or not you belong to the church, whether or not you belong to the body of Christ, right? I don't care. Come at me.
You heard-
There are faiths, and not disparaging the people belonging to them, that will present themselves in Christian terms. I'm thinking of things like Mormonism, for example.
Yeah.
That have distinct points of doctrinal points of view that when I say distinct, I mean they run completely contrary to what the fundamental teachings of Christianity are. Right. So my thing is, again, I'm not disparaging people. What I'm saying is either you're one or the other. You can't be
Yeah.
both.
Because outside looking in, they believe in Jesus. You know,
They'll
it
use-
Well, they
appears as
say-
though they believe what we believe,
Yeah.
but then when you, like you say, you drill down,
They don't.
it's really a
Yeah.
lot different.
Well, and the argument is, they're like good. They're good moral people. They teach a lot of good stuff. They talk about Jesus. Like, isn't it close enough? And it's like, okay, yeah, like politically, it makes sense. If there's some sort of bill and it's something that you both agree on, yeah, sure, work together. But as a question of theology, as a question of Christian identity, you cannot overlook that stuff, right? And so this is why, Caleb alluded to it, I'll say it, I don't believe Mormons are Christians because of this fundamental thing.
Yeah.
I think that, some of the moral teaching is good, right? There's plenty of faiths that have good moral teaching in various ways in some aspects, but what is Christianity? Well, it's fundamentally based on who is Christ. And if you have a different answer to who is Christ than the one that the Bible teaches and Christians have historically believed for hundreds upon hundreds of years, then you are not definitionally a Christian.
Right.
And I'm not picking on just the Mormon
There's
Church.
a lot,
It's the same way. I picked the reason why I use that example is because on the surface that one looks as though it might be mistaken as identical to the Christian Church, but it really, in terms of the doctrine, it's the same as saying that Orthodox Jews are not Christians, right? And no, I don't think an Orthodox Jew would claim that. They wouldn't, definitely,
right?
Because we have a different idea of the identity of who Jesus is and who God is, and so let's make our demarcation lines clear.
To some people, this might sound a little like narrow-minded or
narrow
judgmental.
is the way.
But narrow is the way. But let me describe it to you this way, and this goes back to John's own personal history as well that I talked about earlier. If I have a friend named Fred, and I say he's 6 foot tall, he used to be a linebacker, he's a big guy, he really likes sports cars, but he also likes frou-frou drinks at coffee houses. And then you say, oh yeah, I know Fred. He's 5'2", he's from France. He's a professional pilot. He doesn't drink coffee, and he's kind of like a smallish guy. And his real name is actually like John. We are not talking about the same person. Fundamentally, it's not that like you have a different opinion of Fred, or it's not that like you have done different things with Fred, so you have different qualitative ideas of who he is. No, we're not talking about the same person.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I hear y'all saying is really, for one, you need to understand, you need to have a good Christology. You need to know who you believe in and what their nature is,
right?
Christ and God and Spirit. And you need to know what the Scripture says, and be knowledgeable of God's Word, which is Jesus.
That's right. And I'll add to this because this we sort of talked about that from the question that you posed about what is the practical application of this letter. Well, I also just want to point out that I think that the practical application of 2 John, for many people, maybe not in our cozy American context, but for many people around the world currently, present day, is literally exactly the same as the context of who he's writing to then, which is that we can take a very straightforward application of John in terms of being covert, in terms of being careful who you allow in your fellowship, because not just because you don't want to associate with heretical teaching, but also because it might be dangerous for you. I'm thinking about the underground church in China. Right. I'm thinking about those who are in Nigeria who are being persecuted for their faith. I'm thinking about even in places that we might not think of in terms of Christianity being an outlawed religion, like Russia, for example, where a version of Christianity is legal there from the Russian Orthodox Church. But if you don't fall under the state-sponsored and certified religion, you can be arrested. And so there are questions of, who should we be careful about the people that we allow in our midst who might actually cause harm to the body? So I think we can. There's lots of lessons here, not just about doctrinal fidelity, but also about the safety and the security of believers who are in context where there is a threat of persecution. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really valuable.
And I just want to come back to just the importance of knowing what you believe and knowing the scriptures, because of all the things that we encounter. It would be so easy, just as John was writing, to be swayed if you don't have a solid foundation of what you believe and who it is that you believe in. How easy would it to just believe whatever anybody says?
Yeah, or what the culture says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So get grounded in your faith and in the word for sure. Y'all have any thoughts to kind of wrap up? Anything we didn't kind of talk about?
Just mostly that the weird stuff is the cool stuff in
Yeah.
scripture. Don't overlook it. And if you're reading your Bible and you come across something where you go, I wonder what that means or why that is, maybe you should stop and dwell there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what this podcast is all about. We like to talk about the weird,
Yeah.
the wild stuff. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode with us. Don't forget to subscribe and like all of our platforms that we're on social media so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.